how you feel now. I mean, you obviously knew a lot of this going in. You couldn't tell us at the time. Now that it's there and in the public domain, what do you think?
Well, I just think, I think that we don't need a VAT increase in South Africa. And I think by burdening our citizens with a cumulative 1%, 0.5% this year, 0.5% next year, in the absence of actually putting on the table some of the big, bold things that need to be done to be able to clear the decks, getting rid of some of the legislative things that are holding investment back in South Africa, some of the big things like concessioning the Cape Town port and the other things, I think that it's wrong. And we went into this budget putting a very clear position on the table that we were opposed to VAT. We went into the election saying we were opposed to VAT. However, we were willing to look at some compromises, but the compromises were clearly not able to be made from the other side, and therefore we are not in a position to support this budget. As we sit today, this budget it's a 39% budget, and it's very, very clear that it's a long way from getting over the line. But we remain open. The first vote on a budget will take place on the 2nd of April when the fiscal framework is tabled. Thereafter, the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, and thereafter that, the DORA. We are open, we're willing to talk, we're willing to have a discussion, but it has to be a discussion based where the DA actually gets something of what it wants out of the process as well.
Well, some would say, sometimes you can compromise and you can negotiate a settlement. This seems like a red line, an absolute red line, an unreachable goal. It's either or. So how are you going to build consensus in that environment where there doesn't seem to be any wiggle room?
I don't think that there's no wiggle room. I just think that there needs to be a realization by all parties in the coalition that none of them have a majority, and that you do have to make compromises sometimes, as we have on the cabinet seats, as we have on committee chairs, as we have on Bella, as we have on minimum wage. It's also then time for other parties in the coalition to accept that they occasionally need to make a concession so that we walk away with something that's important to our voters and to the people that elected us, and who look to us and say, but why are you in this coalition if you keep having to make the compromises and you get nothing out of it? That's not how coalitions work. It's not how budgets work, and we saw that in Germany. We're seeing the same thing play out in Japan. There is budget politics that happens, and that this is the new era that we're in South Africa. As I've said, I think that if we can get a deal on the table, we can come back on the 2nd of April, we can pass the fiscal framework with a majority.
What does a deal look like?
Well, a deal looks like perhaps a mix of what we've seen today, but also including some of the bigger concessions that we wanted. A relook, for instance, at the Expropriation Act, which is a huge impediment to investment in South Africa. You cannot say it's divorced from the budget. If we're serious about growth in South Africa, which is essential, because otherwise we don't have growth, we're going to be back here in October for adjustment budget, back in February next year, scrabbling around. Currently have growth of 0.6%. It is middling, it's unsustainable for us going forward. We need to go for growth in a big way. We need to do those things. One of those things is clearing the decks so investors feel that they can come here with confidence. We already have a huge issue in the United States with the Expropriation Act. It's about to hit Europe. We need to be able to say, guys, this is how we clarify the position. And that could easily be done very quickly.
But what's the clarity? And just to stay on that point, because it has been a very sentiment-related thing, and we know that investment is largely guided by sentiment. We've spoken ad nauseum about the tenets of the expropriation bill, the impact and application being wholly understood by the US government, led by the President Donald Trump. Our diplomats, everyone's been at work. I mean, I know that we have some issues around whether we want to engage Washington or not at this stage. Are you supporting their narrative? And by there, I mean the Trump-US narrative?
No, not at all. And their narrative is based on misinformation, that there's widespread land expropriation taking place in South Africa. And I've already been very clearly on the record that that is not taking place. But what that act does do is serves as a deterrent to a potential investor. Would you really come to South Africa and invest billions in a huge factory if at the stroke of a pen a government official can expropriate that without compensation? Surely we should leave that for a court, the backstop. And that's all we ask for, a process to be clarified where a court will be the ultimate arbiter whether nil compensation is applied. I don't think that's too much to ask for. It's in line with what the Constitution says, and I think we could have avoided now the court case, and we can avoid all of this negative sentiment that's going on around the expropriation. It could clarify, make explicit what is currently a cause of great confusion, and I think we could have set South Africa very firmly on the path.
I mean, look, John, and I got to let you go because I know you've got other people to talk to. There are buffers, is my understanding, in that it's not just a government sees a piece of land and will take it away, especially if there's a thriving business that contributes to the South African economy. So it seems like a parochial understanding of that.
No, it's not a parochial understanding. It's a very clear legal understanding. In other countries where you have expropriation, and most countries have expropriation acts, the court is the ultimate arbiter in this particular matter. In this case, government at the stroke of a pen could, and then your obligation sits on you to then go to court to try and get it overturned. All we're saying is, if a nil compensation is going to be applied, let that be a decision of the court, not of a government official. That will then give the assurance to any investor that their investment is safe and that they have the backstop of the courts to be able to do that. What we need to be doing is opening the runway for investment in South Africa, not doing things that are making it very difficult to attract people into the country and get the growth that we need. We can't afford another quarter of 0.6%. It's negative growth.
All right. Well, it's been another hard day at the office. Thanks, John Steenhuisen. So we've had the budget, and these are the reactions from various political parties, and of course, the federal leader there of the DA, talking to us about their reaction to this. We knew going in that they didn't like it, they weren't happy, and now we've had more explanation on what happens next when it comes to South Africa's Economic Balancing Act.